So we've covered some project basics, organizational project management, and project phases and checkpoints. Now that we have a basic understanding, let's look at the basic methodology of project management. Project management is a very comprehensive matter, but to simplify it and spread it to more people so that everyone can learn it, this is the project management methodology. So this approach was developed. Project management as a whole is divided into the initiating process group, planning process group, executing process group, monitoring and controlling process group, and closing process group, collectively known as the 5 process groups: initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. Project management is also categorized along another dimension in the scope management, schedule management, cost management, quality management, resource and communication, risk and procurement, stakeholder management, and project integration. These 10 knowledge areas, in other words, the 5 process groups, 10 knowledge areas, total 49 processes. This is a basic overview. These 5 process groups, they correspond to 4 stages. They are clearly aligned. Initiating process group corresponds to the initiating phase. The planning process group corresponds to organizing and preparing phase. The executing process group corresponds to the executing phase. The closing process group corresponds to the closing phase. Now, you're probably wondering, when should we monitor? We should monitor throughout the whole process. I need to monitor it all. What exactly do we monitor? Monitoring means that first we have a process. There's a right way to do it, and we already have plans. We've laid out the plans. I need to check if we're doing it right. Are we following the process? Second, are we on track? Does it match what I planned? If it doesn't quite match, what should we do to address it? That's what monitoring is all about. So monitoring is really 2 things: supervision, control. I need to keep an eye on things and see if anything deviates from the plan. When there's a mismatch and the gap is bigger than when it's within my acceptable range, we might need to take action to address it. This is what we call control. Of course, we'll spend more time later delving into the specifics, each process in detail. Now, let's look at things like scope management, schedule management, cost management. Basically, as the name suggests, you'll get the idea. So what's the key to scope management? Scope management is all about doing everything needed and nothing more. Anything outside that scope, in theory, optional. Then we have schedule management. It is called schedule in English. It used to be called project time management. This refers to the project's timeline. Is the project under control, or is it already behind schedule, or maybe even ahead of schedule? This is what we are talking about. We don't want the project to be delayed. We want it completed on time. For the cost, we're talking about the budget here, meaning not to overspend. Don't go over budget, right? And the quality needs to meet the standards, adhere to regulations, meet project requirements. Regarding resource management, resources include both manpower and materials. In other words, human resources, material resources. Our resource management involves managing people, materials. As for communication management, why do we communicate? Wherever there are people, there will be conflicts. Wherever there are people, there are conflicts. Wherever there are people, communication is needed. Of course, when it comes to projects, it's never smooth sailing. Every project has its own uniqueness. And because of this uniqueness, it leads to a lot of uncertainties. And these uncertainties, in a way, are actually risks. When we manage projects, risk management is essential. Risk is everywhere. That's why we need to manage these risks. This ensures the project runs within an acceptable range. That is the completion. And this stakeholder management. In resource management, we focus on the entire project teams, resources, and tasks to be done, along with material resources. But apart from our own team members, there are actually many others involved, such as your managers, your clients' managers, suppliers, the oversight team, and even your user base. The list goes on. We have a term for all of them. They're called stakeholders. Everyone who can impact this project, team organization, and everyone affected by this project are stakeholders. We need to manage these groups through stakeholder management. This is all from a project implementation perspective. But sometimes in some projects, you might play the client role. Because if you do it yourself, it can be very time-consuming, and the quality may be unpredictable, and it's very costly. It's best to leave professional work to the professionals. We'll outsource it. We'll hire externally. That's when you're the client in charge. Right. All of this is managed by project integration. Let's tie them all together. Each of these is a field of knowledge. Each one is a brilliant pearl. And project integration management is like a golden chain that links all these pearls together. and it also has its own content. In other words, project integration management covers everything from initiation, planning, execution to monitoring. Scope management and cost management, they involve planning and monitoring, along with other areas of management. They handle planning, execution, and monitoring. But actually, they're all part of it, as the project manager integrates everything, right? All within the scope of project integration management. And throughout this course, we'll cover each of these processes individually and break them down. We'll explain each process, what it does, and its key elements, data, tools and techniques, and the output. This way, you'll grasp the entirety of project management more clearly. So here comes a question. Projects can be complex. Remember, at the beginning we said, when defining a project, we mentioned that even something as simple as cooking a meal is a project, meaning every aspect of our lives. Everything is a project. In that case, does every project of mine really need all these knowledge and all these processes? Isn't that a bit of overkill? Here's the thing, it's like 007. Every time he goes into battle, he has a huge arsenal. But does he take the entire armory with him? Not necessarily. He'll just choose a few weapons from it to fight. That selection process, we'll call it tailoring. Like a tailor's cut, it's also about making choices. You get to choose, you choose what you need. Choosing the processes you need. And all the inputs you need, techniques and outputs. You can adjust these as needed. However, there's one process that you can't skip. It's the one in integration management, where we have a step, develop project charter. Though we haven't covered it yet, but I'll give you a brief overview. Developing the project charter, this document here, it's not something you, the project manager, will handle. It's taken care of by your superior. Your superior will issue this project charter, and they will approve it. Once it's approved, you'll be authorized as the project manager to utilize resources and manage the project. So only after this charter is issued will you be granted these authorizations. That's why you can't alter this document. This document included, if any changes are needed, only the project sponsor can make them. You can't change it. When tailoring, you can't cut the developed project charter. So, as for the other process groups and knowledge areas, theoretically, you tailor them to your needs. To give you an example, say, for instance, if you were to, on a weekend, invite some good friends over to your place for dinner and throw a dinner party. If you think of it as a project, would you need to consider every detail, every single aspect, like timing and budget? You probably wouldn't. The concept of cost, right? You just want everyone to enjoy the meal. It's a rare treat to have you here. I'm honored that you could make it, right? So not every project considers these aspects. This is something to keep in mind. So remember the term tailoring. Another thing to note is when we're working on a project, process inputs, there are tools and techniques and some outputs. What does this mean? Let's use a simple example. This, I'm sure many of you can make tomato and egg stir-fry. Right. I hear people from the south and the north make tomato and egg stir-fry different, but it doesn't matter. So usually if you're going to make scrambled eggs with tomatoes, you'll definitely need to get some tomatoes ready first. Then you'll need some eggs. You might also want to grab some scallions. And of course oil, salt, the usual. Once you've got all that ready, that's what we call inputs. The ingredients, basically. Then we need to get some pots and pans. These pots and pans are your tools. Gas is another one of your tools, but just having tools isn't enough. You also need to know how to cook. If you ask a toddler to make tomato scrambled eggs, they can't do it. So you need that skill too. And everyone's skill level, they might not be identical. But in this case, if we're making a simple dish like tomato and scrambled eggs, I believe most people have the skills for this. You can take the ingredients, them up, mash them up, fry them up, mix them together, and it's ready to eat, right? So there's this technique. We need these tools and techniques to turn all of this into a finished dish. That's the output. Process is pretty much the same thing. Every process has some inputs and involves using some tools and techniques to finally get an output. For example, as we just said, there's a process that can't be tailored. We call this developing the project charter, right? So when developing the project charter, final output is the project charter itself. Its inputs might include business case, the benefits management plan, and things like that. Then we have the tools and techniques, which might involve expert judgment, meetings, and other methods. So that's the basic idea. Let's delve into that a little.